Welcome to The Perfect 100, the podcast for BNI members who want to maximize their membership, deepen their impact, and grow their business through intentional networking. I'm your host, Tammy Zurak, a CliftonStrengths coach, longtime BNI leader, and one of the few members worldwide to maintain a perfect Power of One score. Each week, we'll explore the habits, mindsets, and everyday strategies of BNI members who are turning their membership into momentum. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Perfect 100 podcast. I'm excited to bring a guest from outside my area today. I want to welcome Holli Margell. She is a photographer, and she's based in the Seattle area. So I'm going to let her tell us a little bit more. Holli, tell us, how long have you been a BNI member? What chapter are you in, and what seat do you hold?
Yeah, so I'm Holli Margell, based here in Seattle, Washington, and I'm a member of the West Side Professionals BNI chapter. I've been a member for 10 years. This is my 10th year, and I am the portrait photographer in my chapter. And we have leadership roles. I've done all of them except VP. And right now I'm taking it easy. I get to give the closing quote at the end of the meeting.
That's so funny. I have also, so Holli and I know each other through a worldwide photography group. You may have heard me mention before. My first career, my first solopreneur career is a portrait photographer, and I was a mentor, or still am a mentor in this. It's the Portrait Masters, which is a worldwide photography organization that Holli is in, and we have so many similarities. We are portrait photographers. We've been in BNI for 10 years. And it's funny, you just said you've been everything but the VP, and me too.
Yes, that's the hardest job.
Right? Yeah, that's the one that is, you get to have your fingers in everything, but you also have to hold all the people accountable for all the things, which I'm perfectly okay with, but it's just so much work.
Yes.
I would rather apply the work to being, which I know you have as well, Ben, you also were part of BNI as a franchise and then part of BNI as a company-owned region. And that's what happened here as well, is we were the first 5 years of my BNI career, essentially, we were franchise and then core company owned, bought the region. So we were part of them. And so I've been back then it was structure consultant under the franchise, and the equivalent is chapter success coach. And you've done the same, right?
Yes, yes. So I was right in that cusp of the changeover, and then also through COVID, right? My business slowed way down, and
Right.
so it was a natural fit to step up and be part of the BNI leadership on the corporate side as that transition happened. And then as soon as my business started getting busier, I was like, I had to make a choice. Where do I put my time? And of course, my first love is photography. So yeah, I was in that role long enough to really appreciate how much it takes to run BNI as an organization and really understand why things and systems are in place the way that they are.
Yeah, it's, I think for the average member who isn't involved at a higher level, being involved at the chapter level is amazing because it brings you so much more visibility to all the things that you're doing. But it also allows you to have input, if you will, into kind of where things go and how things are done and how to make things better. And we'll get to your strengths later, but I think improvement is some of what you like to do in terms of your strengths, which we'll come back to when we get to that section here on the podcast. But we're going to roll into your 45 seconds. I have a timer up on the screen if you're able to see. I know not everybody is watching us, but some of us are listening, but I'm going to go ahead and start this, and you go ahead and roll and stop when it's over.
All right. Hello, my name is Holli Margell. I'm a portrait photographer based in Seattle, Washington. My ideal client is a busy business owner with a family. For example, I recently worked with Laura and Doug. They own a construction company, which means their crew shifts and changes over the seasons. And they have me come on site to do headshot portraits of their team members as it shifts. And when their family needs a seasonal holiday card photo, they have me work with them and their twin daughters. If you know of someone like them, they have a busy business. They're busy with their teenage kids or younger children, and they need a photographer that can be their go-to. I'm happy to be that person for them. You can connect me by sharing my website with them, holliwithani.com.
Awesome. All right. So this is the perfect 100. So we're going to roll over and have a look at your power of one. So looks pretty good to me. We always are looking for green is ideally what a member who's trying to get the most out of their membership has, right? So
Yes.
I will, for the folks that are only listening and not watching, I will read across for them. So your total score is 70 in the green. You have 98% attendance for 20 points. You have, I'm not going to read all the numbers, I'll just read the highlights. For referrals per week, you have 10 points in the red. Visitors per week, you have 0 points in the gray. One-to-ones, you have 20 points in the green, and CEUs per week, you have 20 points in the green. So looking at all those different areas, what do you find is the easiest for you? What comes most natural for you?
Yeah, so it's kind of a tie, right? The easiest for me would be CEUs and one-to-ones. I find that one-to-ones help me always keep top of mind of like when or what kind of referrals are best for folks. And I would say that the CEUs have been really helpful. They're easy for me to slip into my schedule so that I'm constantly thinking about how to be a better BNI member.
Yeah, I'm not surprised again because I'll hint to your Clifton strengths. CEs is probably something that you enjoy based on what your assessment returned, and we'll talk about that later. Um, let's also roll over to the personal palms report. So that breaks it down a little bit more, and I've got it on my screen to the left, so I'm going to look over here. So it has tracked, looks like about 24 weeks of activity, and so if anyone listening as a member, you're ever curious, did that thing I did get put into the system, or did I get credit for it? Maybe you feel like you're missing something. You can always go to the personal palms report and have a look and see what was recorded each week. And that assumes that your vice president has processed the reports in a timely fashion. But you have all presence and just one sub, so 0 absences, referrals given inside 17, referrals given outside 12. That's amazing. Referrals received inside 16 and referrals received outside 11. I want to pause to ask because I don't know your chapter. Tell me about how big is your chapter and how long have they been around?
Yeah, so our chapter is over 20 years old. And so we have a lot of like really good, solid, longtime members. But things, of course, shift and change. We kind of fluctuate in member numbers. I'd say we're probably at 26 right now. And when I first joined the chapter, we were at 47. And I gotta say, COVID really hit us in our region really hard for our all of our chapters in our area. So we're constantly in this point of like rebuilding, kind of like recovering from the pandemic, really.
Yeah, and and again, we're kind of, so, I don't know, like I feel like we're living parallel lives here. My chapter that I was in right before the pandemic hit, we were over, I think we were at 41. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, we went to virtual, which the good news is there was the structure had already been built for us. There was some forethinking that we're an international networking unit, we should be able to be online and connect to each other. So that sort of foundation had already been laid. And when COVID hit and everybody went home and, we weren't going to meet in person anymore, they flipped a switch and everybody was on Zoom within a week or two, I believe. And we went to online in the chapter I was in at the time. And over the course of the year, in I forget how many months it was, but I think we went home in March and we went back in October of the following year. And I came back as the president. I think you did too. Is that right?
A little bit like on the tail end, actually. I think I was the second year post-pandemic president because
Okay.
it's the year previous to this one.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And then we had everybody, I think it was a challenge to a lot of people suffered, right? As the pandemic kind of took a lot of people out of, the opportunity. And you and I were both, I was a portrait photographer at the time, and we followed the rules for salons because we did hair and makeup. So we had to close down for 9 weeks. And so that was really hard. And I really depended on my chapter to help support me through that because without any opportunity to really work, I had to be building for when we were able to start up again and able to survive that because of BNI, really. All right, so let's go into the rest of it here. So we've got visitors, 3, one-to-ones, 42 one-to-ones over a 24-week period. Sounds like a good number to me. And then thank you for close business. You've given, and this is the number, if you're looking at this report, is what you've given, not what you've received. $17,268 and 51 CEUs. So you've given a lot, and it looks like you've also received a lot, almost kind of an equal measure. One hand gives and one hand receives. So what have you found has been your success in being able to deliver for yourself and for the others in your chapter?
Yeah, so I think it's like really maintaining relationships and being sure that I understand what my fellow BNI members are after in their business goals. And you learn over the years, right? As I wouldn't say a 10-year member, you're really seasoned. You kind of get what people's ideal referrals are if you've been in the same group. And then continuing those one-to-ones, I think that's the biggest secret sauce in BNI is like if you just continue to go through your roster and also expand outside your chapter and meet with the other members in the other chapter, that can help you continue to grow and expand your business community.
Completely agree. I built my business on not only being in my chapter, which, and I actually didn't complete that thought, is we were 40 something, and when we came back from COVID back to in person, we were 21. So
Yeah,
we had a lot of growing to do, which we did over that next year and a half. We got back into the 40s, but it's a process.
awesome.
Yeah, it was an interesting time, but the great thing is we weathered the storm. So
Mhm.
when you think about or look back over the 10 years in BNI, what really impacted you the most? What about your membership was most helpful to you, do you think?
Yeah, well, I really credit my BNI chapter and experience as really helping me grow up as a business owner. And I say that because, I was a grown up when I joined. I think I was 33 at the time. But it was like the first time I'd gone all in on myself for a business. And I went in feeling very shy, butterflies in my stomach, not in my throat, just talking about myself in front of people, to now today, at the drop of a hat, I can give my, elevator pitch like it's no big deal because I know it so well and I've just built up that confidence. And, I think that's something that people don't realize is the repetition really counts. The consistency really counts. So I would say BNI helped me grow up as a business owner. And then also just having that support network. And I don't mean it like a support group. I mean, having knowledge and connection to other business owners. I mean, like the auto shop in my chapter, we are very different people running very different businesses, but hearing her journey and how she's doing and managing like has really encouraged me. It's like I teeter that line of like, do I call them my business family or do I call them my business support group? They're kind of a mix of the two.
Right, right. Yeah, it's great to have colleagues, that get you and understand and ride the ups and downs with you, and are there for all the things. So that's amazing. This episode is brought to you by Tammy Zurak Coaching. Ready to build your strengths, your business, and your brand? Visit TammyZurak.com and click the button to book your free strategy chat. Let's turn your passion into a thriving success. TammyZurak.com. Have you ever made any mistakes in networking that you felt like you learned something from?
Yes, of course. One of the things that I first did that I regret, but also I don't regret because I learned from it was a couple of people had suggested to me, these were other business owners in my chapter, and they gave me advice based on what the previous photographer had done. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to give it a try. And that was giving things away for free. I'm a very generous hearted person and I will help people out as best I can. But giving things away for free or at a ridiculous price point where I can't even cover the babysitter and the food and beverages, that was a big mistake. I did that because they're like, oh, well, the past photographer did this. You should do
Mm,
this too. And I thought, okay, why not give it a try? That cost me, it cost me in a couple different ways. One, so I did like a headshot happy hour where I charged hardly anything. It gave me a great opportunity to really show what I could do, but I really, we have 2 children at the time that needed a sitter. My husband was out of town, so I had to pay the babysitter. I brought food and beverages like snacks and nibbles, and I did not break even.
oh no, that's not good.
It was not good. And then what that did, which I also want to share here for any photographers listening in, is when one of those business owners came back to me and said, "Hey, I'd love to have you come do mascots for my company. I was like, great, here's my package, my quote.
That's what it
She's
costs.
like, why does it cost so much? You only charge this much at this event. And I was like, oh, well, that's
Yeah.
not my usual rate. I did that as a favor because it was recommended.
Right. Yeah, that's and I think it's probably not only photographers, right? Is when we come in, I think there are a lot of different businesses that maybe food service, catering. People want to test it out. Let's see. You could do it, and that's a common because I've been a mentor in the photography group for 10 years. That's a common thing that people ask photographers to work for free. And I don't know why that is. I don't know, it's like, oh, well, everybody has a phone and you push a button and that you can take pictures, but that's not what a photographer does.
No.
So, I appreciate that learning that there is value always to what you offer. And lots of folks in BNI offer a discount to fellow BNI members, and I think that's fine, because we're helping each other out if you choose to do that. But giving it away for free is generally not always the best route because of all the reasons you just said. So thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. How about
Yeah.
your biggest win in BNI? What's been your biggest win?
Yeah, so my biggest win. So this is a story I love sharing. So as business owners, we set different goals for ourselves. In 2019, I was on a family road trip and we were driving through the countryside and my kids were noticing all these billboards. And it was not the first time they'd seen billboards, but because it was such a rural area, there was hardly anything to look at, they noticed them more. And I realized, wow, a couple of things. One, some of these photographs of people were terrible.
Yeah.
Two, uh, billboards, while they seem archaic, are actually a really effective way of marketing and getting in front of people. And so when I returned the next week and visited my BNI chapter regular weekly meeting, I said to the chapter, I said, an ideal referral for me is the business owner who's ready to put their face on a billboard to represent their company. I want to be that photographer, their photographer. Well, last year I got to be that photographer for a
Nice.
member in my chapter who was in that meeting, who's a really long-standing member. And it just gave me so much pride. Granted, the only people seeing this are those driving that specific road,
Right.
seeing that billboard. But it was just so exciting to be like, I got a portrait on a billboard. I did it.
Yeah, it feels there's a sense of pride, I think, when you see something you've created up for all the world to notice. And I think we forget sometimes that no matter what we do, there is something that we've given, and that's kind of like the giver's gain thing, right? Is we no matter what our profession, we're giving something of tangible value to someone else. And in our, as a photographer, you can see it, which is great because it's up there for the world. But it's amazing when you ask for and receive what you had a dream to put together, and there it was. So love that. All right, so let's roll over to the Clifton Strengths. We will go through what your top 5 are. So you have a few that we have not heard from yet on the podcast, so I'm excited to hear about that. So you have learner. So you have a great desire to learn and want to continuously improve. The process of learning rather than the outcome excites you. That's your number 1. Your number 2 is strategic. You create alternative ways to proceed. Faced with any given scenario, you can quickly spot the relevant patterns and issues. Number 3 is empathy. You can sense other people's feelings by imagining yourself in others' lives or situations. Number 4 is developer. You recognize and cultivate the potential in others. You spot the signs of each small improvement and derive satisfaction from evidence of progress. And number 5 is achiever. You work hard and possess a great deal of stamina. You take immense satisfaction in being busy and productive. So have you taken any type of assessments before, Holly?
I have, but not this specific one.
Okay, awesome. So what about it was most interesting to you, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm not surprised by the top 3 at all. I think the developer part I was surprised by. I shouldn't be when I reflected on it, because I think it kind of comes naturally parenting. You learn these skills.
Okay.
But yeah, that did surprise me a little bit.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and so you have, I mentioned earlier, you have things that others that we haven't had a learner yet, and so I'm curious to hear a little bit more from someone who is a learner. And my learner, I think I'm at 18 on learner, so it's not my top thing, but learner for a lot of people is an opportunity to improve, right? They want to learn more, seek things out so they can be better. How does that play out for you?
Yeah, so I always love learning new things, and how that shows up for me is let's see. I think really as a business owner, one of the things I was able to identify pretty quickly, I would say in like the first 3 years of business, was that I really wanted to give myself, I guess, an assignment every year, like something new that I wanted to learn or master before I found something else to focus on. So here I am running my business, but I also wanted to level up an area. So for example, that those first, I think year 3 in business, I took a class on SEO so I could improve my ranking for my website. And then the following year, it was like, oh, I'm going to learn social media marketing. So I took a class on that.
Okay.
So I'm constantly looking for opportunities to learn in my for my business benefit and then also in my personal life, right? So I was a member of a pea patch, which is a community garden space. So I was able to coordinate a tree pruning class, even though I don't have any. At that time, I had no trees, but I knew I wanted trees, but I knew I needed to take care of them.
Okay, interesting. How do you know
Yeah.
when you have enough information? Because learner is not necessarily focused on the outcome, but more about, kind of getting the information. So how do you know when you've learned enough?
When I feel competent to do the thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, I don't need to like become an expert in everything, but I need to feel comfortable moving forward doing the thing.
Okay, awesome. And looking at the ones that are there, what do you feel like maybe you could lean more into to help you in BNI in your business, so on?
Yeah, so I think strategy is actually something that came up for me. It was something I realized I wanted to put more intention around this year. I also like I said, I set goals and areas to learn. I think when I hear the word strategy, I tend to think about um, boring checklists. And I picked up a book by Seth Godin called This is Strategy and began that as well. And he talks about, strategy is actually a lot bigger than a series of checklists. It incorporates many things. And so I think that how that would show up for me as a BNI member is being more strategic in how my area for most growth, the area of my weakness in BNI is inviting visitors. So just getting comfortable with like, what's my strategy for inviting visitors, right? Because we can't control whether or not they show up, but we
Right.
can control how many we invite.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. And we didn't get to that part, or I didn't ask that question when we were looking at your Power of One, but that was the one area where you didn't have color.
Yeah.
So I love that you're applying that to that.
Staying ahead in a world driven by technology is key. At Wisdom Integrators, we don't just solve problems, we create opportunities. Wisdom Integrators, connecting your world, solving your problems.
And, strategic is my number one, but it's interesting because the 5 things you have in the top, and I always do this whenever I bring this up, is they blend together uniquely for you. So there's a DNA strand. If you look at, and for those that are seeing me on the screen, there's a DNA strand at the top and when you do the full 34, they have that, or if you go on Gallup's website, you see that, because it's your unique set of things. And if you have your strategic plays out differently for you than mine does for me. And I'll make a list, but I'm not married to a list. I'm more about the strategy. For me is how to solve a problem, right? As I can immediately, my brain just ticks through, and I'm sure you probably have some of that too, where you tick through a whole bunch. And I think yours probably, and you can tell me, but because you acquire knowledge through learning, maybe you set the strategy and then learn some more information and then apply it. And I don't know how that works for you. Maybe you can tell me.
Yeah. So I haven't So again, when I think about the word strategy and what it means to me, I had been holding it as something that's a little bit more checklist oriented, systems oriented, and I find those to be boring. And so I think for me, strategy is more of an intuitive process that where, I'm learning new things, I'm applying those new lessons, I'm shifting how I do things. So I didn't like consciously think of using strategy. I thought of it as more of, oh, I'm evolving and improving how I do things.
Sure. Do you hold a position within the chapter itself?
Not at this time. I mean, I have I would say that one of those fun roles. So I get to do the closing quote, which
Okay.
I am applying a strategy to. I
Okay.
plan them out every month ahead of time. So there's a little strategy there.
Gotcha. Well, and you also have empathy. Do you consider yourself an emotional person?
Yes.
Okay. How do you think that that kind of colors how you have relationships with people in BNI or in your business? I know in your business because I know, we did similar types of things that photography and empathy for me are hand in hand because in order to connect with somebody, it's better when you have high empathy because it's a very vulnerable position for people. Most people, they're fine with you hold your phone up and take it. Well, some of them are fine when you hold up your phone and take a picture, but when it comes to an actual photo shoot, it creates a whole different set of things. So I believe that's going to be a great aid to you naturally. But how about in business? How does that work for you in terms of BNI?
Yeah, so in BNI, the empathy piece, right? I really care about people, how they're doing, not just what their business does. I care a lot about people being successful, taking care of, we're all in business to take care of our families and ourselves, right? And so I care very deeply about people. Sometimes I have to check that though, because, there's some boundaries, right? Around like, oh, I care about this person. I see them kind of making some mistakes here, but it's not my place to call it out, but rather notice and don't focus on that. And then, I really care about our chapter growing, right? After COVID, it shifted and changed, but I also know that I can only do my part and everyone else has to do theirs.
Yeah.
So I probably care more than the average, but I don't know because I don't start my one-to-ones out to be like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do
Right.
you really care about me? Right. I
Right.
don't I don't have those conversations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just is part of the fabric of who you are, right? And I don't. My empathy is number 27. So in people when you see the full list, you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, that sounds bad. My empathy is low," right? But it's not that I don't have empathy. I do have empathy. I just don't. That's not my go-to at the top of
Right.
the list. Is I lead with other things and pull that out when it's necessary for me because it's just not the first thing. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will say that I have been told several times while having one-to-ones, people will be like, wow, you'd make a really great therapist.
ah,
I'm like, I don't want to be a therapist. They're too empathetic.
Right. Yeah, because then you take on everybody else's stuff, right?
Yes.
And that
Yeah.
sometimes goes along with empathy is there's a for some people they can be perceived as a softer touch, so to speak. So
Right.
do you feel like that in any way? Like how do you combat and that's not necessarily the right word, combat us being a soft touch is often a good thing. But how do you play that into being a leader in what you do in business?
Yeah, well, I think it really has to do with being, I'd say growing up, right? And being more self-aware of what serves me and what doesn't serve me. Like really learning when it's my place or not my place to ask personal questions.
Right.
So as a BNI leader, I might be far more gentle in terms of my communication style. And I also think that that's where strategy has maybe come up for me as well, where I didn't realize it, where I think, okay, I need to call someone on being more accountable.
Yeah.
And it's going to serve all of us better, even
Yes.
though I feel really, really bad speaking up to that.
Yes. Well, and that's a blind spot for some people with that high, level of empathy is they don't want to, right? Because it makes them
Hmm.
feel bad and it makes everybody feel bad. And you take that on for yourself where someone else might just say, it's just what we need to do in order for, things to be better. So it's good to have that recognition, but it's also good. You said something in there, for me, when you're building your chapter, you need that diversity of things. You need people who have different talents. And, when I was the president, I had a vice president and a secretary treasurer who had very different strengths from me. And
Right.
that was a good thing, right?
Yes.
Because I'm going to go hard charging into strategy number one, maximizer in my top, command, all the things. So I know I need that empathy person. I need that harmony person. I need that
Yeah.
includer person on my team, because we all need to work together, because they sometimes need to pull me back and say, wait, but you have achiever high. Also, your achiever was number 5 and I'm number 10, and achiever works all the time and, wants to get there, right? Let's get there, do the thing. And not everybody else has that either. So it's
Right.
amazing when you look at across your BNI chapter, if you were all exactly the same, you probably wouldn't be as successful.
Correct.
And that
Yes.
helps you as your business too, right? It's because you can, with those things, especially if you work alone or just with a small team in your business, it gives you other resources that you can trust, right? Know, like, and trust that you have that support team behind you, that maybe you bring a problem from your business to someone else that has a different set of strengths that you could bounce those things off of, and they can give you different feedback, which is amazing.
Mhm.
All
Yeah.
right. So, what one piece of advice would you give to somebody who wanted to build a stronger referral network? You've been in, all the different positions. What have you seen from your purview that would help people build things in your 10 years of experience?
Yeah, so I think recognizing that building relationships takes time, just like in your personal life. So in your business life, the same holds true. And to be really, and this is my empathy part showing up, is like recognize that people aren't just here to be transactional, right? We're motivated by being in relationship with each other. So take the time, don't rush it, and understand that, we're all entering into relationships from a different perspective. So we might, you might need to have coffee with somebody 5 times before you get a transaction from that relationship. Whereas someone else, like two achievers meeting, they might be ready to go to pass referrals that first meeting.
Right. That's awesome. I love that. And what one thing have you done, or what kinds of, like, how do you structure your business that's unique and different to you that helps you stand out from others and get more referrals?
Yeah, so I think the piece that's maybe different, I don't think it's that different though in our industry of photography, but really helping people feel good, right? So the number one thing people say after they work with me is, wow, I feel so much better. I was so stressed beforehand. And then giving them that good feeling, that good experience, that returns customers or that returns referrals to
Yeah.
me. So I recognize that right away. It wasn't like a strategy leading into it. It happened naturally. So recognizing like, how do you make people feel? And then hold space for whatever that needs to be. If you're a banker or you're an insurance broker, it might be that you're responsive and you communicate well. And then for me, I need to communicate well, but also I help people feel good about themselves.
Yeah, it goes back to that vulnerability that we talked about earlier. Is if people don't feel safe or comfortable, they're not going to have a good time. And you want them to walk out feeling energized and better about what they experienced than what they probably came into with the expectation of feeling uncomfortable, but leaving feeling amazing. So I love that. What's next for you? What are you working on? What areas are you growing in personally, professionally?
Yeah, so I mean, following that thread of the learner, right? My number one trait there.
Yes.
Something that I realized 2 years ago was that I wasn't consistently feeling fulfilled from my work. And what I mean by that is I need more novelty. And so I am an artist. Of course, all of my creative energy was focused on my business. So I've made more intentional space to get creative. I did a self-portrait series, for example. I know I'm not the first photographer to do that. Many, many photographers have done that.
Right.
And that has led into me really digging into my family history. I'm a citizen of the Eastern Shawnee tribe of Oklahoma.
Okay.
And so I've started to show up more in the creative space representing my tribal nation. And I did my first artist residency last year. So I'm looking for more opportunities in that area, which has nothing to do with my business, but also, I mean, they go hand in hand, right? As my creative heart and cup get filled, then my business energy stays high.
That's amazing. And I was just looking to see, I feel like that falls into somewhere in your top 5 strengths is kind of having that. And I think that's part of that learner piece is knowing where you come from and digging into that culture probably has some significance from your learner perspective is, that's a big piece of who we are in understanding, where we're going and all of those things. So I love that. So I also want to tell people that Holli has a podcast, and I went on her page and she had an interview with the famous Ivan Meisner. And
Yes.
I learned a whole bunch of new things that it was not the same it's called the Career Spotlight podcast. And we'll drop a link below for anyone that wants to go and listen to that. But what was something you pulled? He told you a whole bunch of stuff that nobody has heard about and was interesting. It wasn't necessarily, it was more about his foundational, I think that's what you're digging into with everybody is how they got to where they are. And so what was
Exactly.
the thing that surprised you most from that interview?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, when you hear Dr. Ivan Meisner, anybody who's been in BNI for even a year, they know that like, wow, this is the guy, right? He's the person who started everything. And, we hear about all of his expertise and his trainings and his books and his podcast. What was great was really learning where he came from, right? Maybe that's my learner. But I found it fascinating. And that's the whole point of our podcast is to figure out how people got to where they are in their career path. And I find a lot of inspiration hearing about people's journeys. So Dr. Ivan Meisner did not come from, a lot of money or anything like that. He really was somebody who built his own success. And, I don't think we hear that. It doesn't come up naturally in his podcast or the books. And I mean, maybe little hints of it, but to hear where he came from was very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. That it's always, and I'm sure it was appeasing your learner, learning all those things about him, but also just very interesting because I love to know people's journey to success too. And I feel like as a business coach, and why I wanted to get certified for CliftonStrengths is these are all clues to future things for me. I have a high futuristic and I like to look down the road and see, so that's kind of a past journey. But it also helps you to see, okay, how did they get there, right? What were the pieces that made them who they are? So I enjoy that as well. So I have one last question is what was the most impactful thing for you today that we talked about?
Yeah, well, I really love how you really put a magnifying glass on the power of one as well as the Palms report, and then talk about the Clifton results, right? And like where are you with that, and how do you put them, I guess, together, right? And leverage those strengths. So I really appreciate that because I think as a member in BNI, I think like 5-6 years ago when corporate took over, it was a new thing for us and we didn't know how to interpret it. And it's been confusing ever since. So I appreciate you sharing that and really explaining how that might show up as a more effective BNI member.
Awesome. All right. And so we're almost at the end here. I want to thank you for being a guest. And if you're listening here today, if you enjoyed what you heard and want to hear more, be sure to like, subscribe, share, comment, all the things that helps other members find us. And thank you for being here on the Perfect 100 podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Perfect 100. If today's episode sparked a new idea or inspired you to show up differently in your chapter, share it with your team and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a conversation. And if you're curious about your own CliftonStrengths and how to bring out the best in yourself or your chapter or your business, head to TammyZurak.com to learn more about building your superpowers into everything you do. Keep showing up, keep connecting, and keep building your Perfect 100.